Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm Silvia Martins, CEO and co-founder of Five Validation. I'm grateful for the confidence of John Nugent. It was his idea of doing this section, and everything was done with great care and affection by him and by my coworkers from Five Validation. Before I start, I'd like to remember you to use the QA button here in Zoom to type your questions. I am happy to answer all of your questions, but don't worry. If your question is eventually not answered, we can try to schedule a special online meeting session with you. Before we go to QA session, I'd like to make a fast presentation just to have everyone here on the same page. Well, I'm here today to talk about the following topics linked with the paperless validation frequent asked questions. Business risks that no compliance in validation can bring to the business and its impact, and how the recent accelerated digital transformation has increased the demand of the validation area. Stay tuned because I'm going to tell you how we at Five have improved our efficiency. Just to give you a spoiler, in 2018, we had 40 validation projects for 27 professionals working. Now we are more than 100 projects with only 15 professionals working in validations. A little bit about my experience. I'm an electrical engineer. I have almost 20 years of experience in systems validation. My first GAMP training was in England. I did training in SAP validation in Germany. And finally, I had the opportunity to learn about data integrity in Denmark. I have given several trainings for inspectors of Brazilian regulatory agency, Anvisa. I was co-worker and coordinator of the group that built the first Brazilian validation guideline in 2010. Then I was co-author and coordinator of two other guides, cloud-based service providers qualification and data integrity. I'm a co-founder of Five Validation. I am ISP and PDA member. But let's get started to what really matters. Let's talk about validation. But what is it? According to FDA, it's the establishment of documentary evidence, that is, a set of documents that prove a specific process will result with a high degree of safety and reproducibility in a product that meets the specification and the quality attributes previously determined. In other words, validations are several studies that prove process, software, equipment will always work, always with quality in a repeated manner, including that integrity, a very important compliance requirement. And what does validation have to do with all this credibility and security that pharmaceutical companies need to transfer to their patients and their clients? They need to show good data integrity practices in their batches. They need to prove quality of the product, and they need to avoid risks to patient and or consumer. And why do companies need to zeal for all of this? Only by missions and values? It's important, but the answer is no, because compliance impacts the business. So if validation is the proof that things are good in the company, then validation impacts to company success as a whole. We have clients that validate the functions of their ERPs, Enterprise Research and Planning, that have no relation with the quality of the product. Interesting, isn't it? Clients that have shares stocks in the United States need to meet SOX, which is a law which requires proof of good financial governance practices. For example, taking care of access control of who registers supplier accounts to ensure that the correct bank accounts are registered. So, validation. Now let's study a bit of what the market is reached by validation. Companies that need to validate. Markets that we consider no-go. In other words, without validation life cycles concluded, they cannot release their products on the market because they can't get, for example, license to manufacture or can't have a good manufacturer practice certificate. Without the certificate, they cannot apply for product registration in FDA or an European regulatory agency, pharmaceutical industry, biotechnology, medical device, medicinal gases, pharmaceutical and herbal medicines. There are those businesses where they need to comply with the good manufacturer practice to operate, but no longer product registration process, perfumes, personal hygiene, cosmetics, and sanitizers. Then we have the ISO compliance. That is, validation no longer prevents commercialization, but it's necessary ISO certification for business expansion. Food recorded in ISO 22000. Calibration testing labs required in ISO 17025. And finally, it has been agreed at the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation Development. In 2016, the OECD issued guidelines for good laboratory practices demanding validation to labs in the following areas: chemistry, genetically modified organisms, agrochemistry, food additives, and feed. This whole set requirements that I comment about OECD is just a practical example of what has already been happening for some time in biopharma products. Regulatory bodies of several countries are organizing themselves in international groups of collaborations. For example, ICH, International Conference on Harmonization, and PICS, which stands for Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme. And why are these alignments important? Why do countries need to have confidence in quality of the products that companies in their countries produce, so they export and they become interesting countries for international investments? Therefore, validation is a global subject that impacts businesses. And in the end of the day, the same requirements requested by EMA or FDA and some other regulatory bodies, which are Brazil, United States, Canada, European Community, Australia, Japan, etc. And the demand for validations within a company is high. There are several validation life cycles. Each study is a set of documents to prove each management software, laboratory software, electronic spreadsheet, production equipment, cleaning procedures, processes, utilities, HVAC, air conditioning, water, compressed air, clean steam, etc. Whenever you look in a company, there are some kind of technology that needs to be validated. There are HMIs in human-machine interface, or there are check vision sensors, for example, or usually automated machines, even minimally automated. Nowadays, there are no more machines with no PLC, programmable logic controller, controlling a piece of equipment. Therefore, in a medium company, it is difficult to find a workload of about 100 validations to be performed. If each validation lifecycle contains 10 documents, we are talking about 1,000 documents. That's a lot. But hardly the validation area is so connected to business strategy. What happens, in fact, is that it's difficult for quality to get enough staff according to workload. You know, people in quality cost. It has no direct relation with sales. It doesn't seem to bring immediate return, but we here know that is so difficult. The more compliance, the more clients, less fines by regulatory agencies, less recalls, less returns, less waste, less corrective action. This all directly impact the business costs. Some impacts are very difficult to measure. Company image, loss of sales, rework, overtime impact, demotivation, delays, extended time to market, customer dissatisfaction, staff turnover, accidents, reprocessing. Five Validation understands that the challenge is enormous without digital transformation. When I talk about digital transformation, I'm not talking about automated to decrease jobs. I'm talking about of making the company to be compliant with regulations. Basically, there are companies that are in three levels of how they operate validation. The first is the conventional model, as we had in 5 for 10 years, that is based on paper. Then the validation professional produces the documentation in Word, for example, based on a template. They proceed with informal review and approval workflow by email, and then print, collect signatures manually, remembering that during the pandemic was a challenge. Assemble the physical folders, run the tests manually, and keep the documentation as a single hard copy. In Module 2, the validation professional generates the documentation in Word, proceed with the review and approval workflow using an EDMS, Electronic Document Management System, which solves one part of the documentation because an EDMS does not understand or manage the test phase. Because when one approves the protocol, they can't test it because an EDMS does not separate the tests steps to be performed. For these tests management, some clients use ALM, Application Management Software. Interesting application, very used in software development, including software house. ALM is expensive and does not come ready to manage validation tests. Usually, this kind of application requires a high level for configuration to manage validation tests phase and their reports to consolidate the tests that passed or failed separated per phase, IQ, OQ, and PQ. Then we have a VLMS, Validation Lifecycle Management Software, a type of software that was developed to manage validations. It does understand the life cycle of a validation. It understands what is a validation. Plan, for example, that are some requirements, risks, and tests linked in a traceability matrix line that the tests must prove related requirements. Goal 5 is an excellent option that was born from an internal need. We are a health tech, a technology company for life science companies. We have been working with validation since 2008. Let me show you some numbers. In 2018, we had 40 validations being made by 27 professionals, that is almost 1.5 projects per professional. Now in 2021, we are now building 103 projects being run by 15 validation professionals. This gives me an average of more than 6 projects per coworker at the same time. It brought us efficiency of more than 4 times faster. Basically, there are 2 factors that contribute to such positive numbers. First, libraries with pre-made validations in the system database, which makes the professional not start from scratch for each new validation project. We have a library for almost all GMP and GDP process for life science industries. Well, this is what I want to tell you for now. It's time for us to start Q&A session. Let's go. Let me check what we have here. Here we go. The first one. How do I decrease regulatory risks to business and data integrity? Okay, validation is one of the important topics for regulatory compliance, not the only one. Handling the demand for so many validations is one of the topics we are actually addressing in this event. I hope I answered this question. The next one, how do I achieve faster time to market? Lack of or delay in document preparation and validation testing is one of the issues that prevents faster time to market because it impacts manufacturer release. For example, digital validation allows 4 times faster work compared to paper, when we compare to paper. The next one, is it possible to work remotely in the validation area? Yes, these days, most validations can be done remotely. Some advantages, healthier staff and quality of life, online management, connecting teams from several countries. Let me check another one. How can I standardize the requirement to risk or test items using a digital validation tool? It is possible to create documents with standard content coming from libraries containing pre-made validations following marked standard guidelines, where the validation professional does not need to start from scratch, speeding up the work. Does digital validation only speed up the issuance of the new initial documentation at the time of implementation? Right. The main challenge is keeping the validation state, which basically contemplates change control and periodic reviews. Digital validation should contribute to easier documentation maintenance. I think this phase is the most important. Next one, do you think it's feasible to calculate a return on investment of a paperless validation approach? Let me, here we go. Yeah, I have it. Based on all knowledge and the effort devoted to each type of validation or qualification, and 5E has developed our ROI spreadsheet that estimates the amount of efforts to bring the site into compliance. Compare the traditional method with the digital method. In addition, the spreadsheet, I'm showing you here just a sample, brings several insights such as the amount of resources needed, return on investment, etc. The idea is to support our client in the projection and evaluation of investments for validation or qualification and business decision-making. The ROI study proposed by the spreadsheet is a conservative estimation that only considers research costs, printing costs, and the number for validation and qualification cycles. In other words, we use as a base only the obvious and easily visible costs. The 5 validation sales team informs the value according to the need that one enters into the spreadsheet field as a starting point for ROI calculation. We support our clients in the return on investment study that Go5, our validation tool, can provide. The 5 validation team has an interesting and robust template where one can enter data on current costs with printers, scans, physical and electronic storage of documents, costs with internal and outsourced labor. Implementing paperless validation management software can bring several benefits to your organization. One of the main and the most tangible ones are the hours spent by the team members involved, including your analysts, key users, quality members, and information technology personnel, for example. If you'd like to have an ROI study performed for your company, please contact us. Here, let me show you. You can contact us and contact our experts at contact@5validation.com. Let me check more questions here. No, it's not here, it is here. Let me check. Let me check here. Does digital validation, oh no, I've read, what size business benefit from paperless validation? And how would 5 validation help us? Do you have validation services? Okay. Yes, we have validation services. We started in 2008, providing validation services. That's why we accumulated huge experience with the validation, and we use this experience to populate the system database to serve our clients in a faster way. That's why our first idea. And after that, we started selling Go5 as a SaaS model, but we still continue providing services and many times remotely with a very good cost benefit, okay? And what size business benefits? Okay, great. Actually, when we talk about a biopharmaceutical and mainly medical devices companies, for example, we can see a lot of startups, medium, large, and global companies, and all of them have the same regulations. It's a big challenge for global companies, of course, but when we talk about the smaller companies, this challenge is huge because they need to have the same, let's say, the same compliance quality as a global company that has some financial resources to do with, for example, hiring consulting companies from all over the globe. And Go5 is a very good solution for small, medium, big, and global companies because our price per month is really feasible. The cost is really good. I remember my co-founder saying, I'd like to have a software that 5 validation would be capable financially to pay. And we have a good amount of core workers specialized in validation, but we are a small company actually compared to a biopharmaceutical company. So we have a very good cost benefit. Do we have more? Let's see. How paperless validation can help during projects run by agile methodologies? Okay, great. Thank you. This is a really good question because when we have, let's say, traditional validation, let's suppose we have a URS. Inside only one document, you have, let's say, 80 or 100 items there. So all of that group of requirements is inside just one document with only one version. If you need to review this document just because you need to add or you need to validate a part of that, you really have a problem because you need to review all the 100 requirements and issue all the documents again. So it's not agile. What we did to solve it in our software is that we had the opportunity to slice each requirement, a test item or risk scenario in one different version from each others. And it is easy when we have a function that we call partial release. So let's suppose you have a project that you need to implement in different phases. Agile is this way. So you unite the risks, requirements, and tests related to the first version. And you start a package. We call this function as a package in a workflow. And you can use partial release function to release this part of the software. And you go on with the other product or other part of the validation or other module. It is also useful when you are working in process validation, for example, where you have, for example, a packaging line with two products there, but 80% of the time you pack product A. So you can start validating it, releasing partially only for product A. Instead, you waiting for some opportunity to validate product B. I don't know if my answer is a bit confused, but I'd like to let you know that we are really able to follow agile methodology that's super agile. Thank you for the question. Let me check how does paperless validation help with audits? It's also a good question. We have a dashboard, and you can check the percentage of all systems, processes, cleaning, piece of equipment, spreadsheet, everything that is related to inventory, for example. So the dashboard can check the percentage of validated states. And you can go to the inventory, for example, and you can check the several releases, because sometimes, mainly when we talk about computer system validation, or we sometimes finish one validation sooner, you will have another version that supplier made available for the client, the IT client to upload. And so you have sometimes to review, to have a new version of this new version, and the system needs to be able to separate it in versions according to the inventory. So you can also have, that is very important function. In United States, the market calls it readiness. So every time you generate PDF reports, for example, you have the most updated validation status. This is super interesting, because in just one deliverable like URS, you can mix with old fashioned, but still current items mixed with recent ones, because the older ones were not impacted by the change or by a set of changes or by an upgrade. So that's why you can have auditor readiness. It means that you can generate PDF reports of the most updated version of each item, reunited in the same deliverable. It's super interesting, and it's super clear. You also have some functions that it is easy to check the set of items related to each partial release. So you can print audit readiness, or you can print per release, per new version, for example. So let's suppose you are under an audit and someone asks you to have all the deliverables impacted by the last change. You can do it. I'd like to check, it doesn't matter the change, I'd like to have the latest updated versions of all validation study. You can also have. So when we work with electronic validation, you start having more freedom to check your validation compliance. It's super interesting. Let me check here. How fast is paperless validation compared to traditional paper-based way? It's a good question. When we talk about ourselves using Go5, we are talking about 4 times faster. Of course, it's not the one day for another, because when a client starts using Go5, actually, we have a decrease of efficiency. It's normal because it's innovation. When we talk about changing the way of a very traditional way to do, and we starting migrating to a very new way to do, your team will perform less, actually. But in a very short time, you see your team as a J cycle innovation, so they are going to fly. That's what happened to us. To be very sincere with you all here attendees, we had a situation in our company when we migrated from paper to paperless. We had this situation because our team started studying the new way, so they need to be focused in learning. So there is a learning curve. They need to start learning how to do it. And actually we have human adaptation. Some coworkers are faster than others to be, some coworkers are more open to changes, to innovation than others. So we are used to say that everyone has, it is their own time, but they go. Managers need to be patient, need to understand that their team is going to drop their performance, but very soon they are going to fly. In my case, I'm a manager. I can say that in 6 months, they are totally 4 times faster in 6 months. And someone can say, oh, 6 months is too much. But actually it's not, because we are talking about years about paperless validation compared to paper. And our implementation time, setup time, is very short. We can implement the system in weeks. It depends on one client from another. It changes a bit because we need our client's team to be available and having some window time to be, let's say, available to a new way to validate. So the implementation phase, the training phase with us take 1 week, but to be 4 times faster, it takes a time to have a fly speed to know, because you need to have a team who really understands what's validation, and you need to have your team trained in the software. Independently if it's our solution or not, you need to be very aware of that. And that's why we also need another platform, another product calls, it calls 5 Training. where it's possible to have online trainings, and we can include it during the implementation phase, because sometimes your, let's say, pain is not to be so faster, but sometimes you are in a team builder period. So we are here to train your team as well, right? Let's check. Tatiana said, thank you for the great explanation. Go5 is an amazing tool that's totally aligned with Agile validation themes. Thank you so much, Tatiana. Thank you so much. So that's why we have for today. Really, that is that. Henrique, do we have some more? Can you check with me? Okay, great. Okay, it was so good to be here with all of you. We had more than 120 subscriptions, so we are glad to be heard by you. Thank you so much for being here, for your time, for your attention. I'd like to thank especially John Nugan, my co-workers, Amanda Nogueira, Bruna Barros, Demetrios Rocha, Henrique Malaquias, João Gomes, Lilian Ribeiro, and Rafael Antonelli. Thank you all again. I look forward to see you soon. Bye-bye.